So, this here is my father-in-law's 1947 Ford Rat Rod. And we built this thing in just about 6 months, 2 years ago over the winter. And it was a complete frame-up build. And I will go through and do the complete build. There's going to be a lot of pictures because this was before I was making YouTube videos. So there are video clips, but there's going to be a lot of pictures. And we're going to get through this, and I will show you guys the complete build on this 47 Ford Rat Rod. On December 17th, 2021, we carried the 48 Ford frame and the 58 Ford front axle and the 65 Ford Mustang rear end into the shop. We started setting stuff on there, just seeing how it looked, mocking some stuff up. We began working on the front end, trying to come up with how we were going to mount that. It took a few tries on the front to figure out how we needed to do it and how we wanted to do it. There's where we started coming up with the final idea on the front end. There's how the leaf spring sits in there suspended now. That's the current design on it. We began welding in some cross members, getting the frame braced up a little bit better. We got the radius drag links put in and got them mocked up into place, figuring out how we were doing those. Here's where the fun stuff began. The motor's just a Chevy 350 with a 350 turbo trans out of a late 70s, early 80s Chevy pickup. We began fitting it into the frame and figuring out where everything needed to go to make it work right. And then we began to get ready to cut out the floor of the cab to lower it down onto the frame. We dropped it about 4 inches total. We didn't want to lose too much in there to make it uncomfortable. We just wanted it enough to cover the frame rails. After we got the cab sitting where we wanted, we started to construct the new floor frame inside. Their original trans tunnel was going to be the gas tank off of an old International tractor. It just didn't quite fit in there right. The pedals wouldn't work and stuff like that, so that idea ended up getting scrapped. There was mocking up the steering, figuring out angles and how the rods had to go on to make everything work. When we initially set that rod up, we had it facing downward because it looked better, but you'd turn the steering wheel left and you'd go right, so we had to flip it over the other way. This here was the first mock-up of seats. That idea ended up getting scrapped too. You'll see later on. Here's where we started building the custom shifter. This took a little bit of figuring out to do. The shift lever is an old lightning rod off of a house. We put a gear catch in there. That's the deck raising and lowering thing off of an old 60s model Sears tractor. It worked pretty good, actually. We just had to widen some of them a little bit to make them hold into gear. I don't really remember what the bumper come off of, but we took about 16 inches out of the middle of it to make it fit where it needed. And I found these great big bolts. We cut them off and welded some half-inch bolts to the back of them, and then just bolted them to the bumpers. It turned out to look pretty cool. Here's where we started building our shock mounts. And then we started to fit the rear end in there for the 4-linked rear suspension with coilovers. That took a little bit of time and figuring on that. Here's where we stepped the frame. We cut it off and stepped it up to clear for the axle and stuff, and shortened it to the right length that we wanted. The bed came off of a 50-something Chevy. I forget what it was exactly. Just because that's a Chevy bed don't mean it didn't have a Ford tailgate. You can make anything fit with a welder and grinder. We ended up having to go back onto the cab and notch it in to make the exhaust fit in there. It wasn't a real big deal. Just kind of sucked after we already fixed the cab up there in the front like that. The final seat ended up being a back seat out of a 78 Ford Bronco that I had out in the field. We had to take the frame for the seat and cut it down in the middle so that it would fit between the doors whenever you shut them. Later on, you'll see what it ended up turning out like. My father-in-law took it and had it reupholstered and everything. And after all that time of building it and putting it together, here's where it all come back apart to start painting and cleaning stuff up. My father-in-law acid washed the cab and everything. My wife and daughter came up and we put them to work painting the frame and the bottom of the cab and everything, getting it all prepped out and cleaned up. And here's that sad old Chevy engine. Hard to believe it cleans up that good. Ready? Ready?
Yeah.
That quadrajet carburetor just wasn't worth anything. It gave us too much trouble. Yeah, it looks real good. Here's where we pre-fitted the gauges into the dash, and I began wiring everything. And that took some time. I don't mind on wiring, but it was a little meticulous to have to do everything on this. So the headlights were off some kind of a Plymouth. I can't really remember. And he ended up picking up a Elderbrock carbon intake for it. So to add to the frustration, when we tore it apart to put that carb on there, we discovered that 2 of the cam lobes were wore off. So he ended up getting a new cam for it, and we replaced that after all the other work that had already been done. And then it was time for clear coat. And then we got the windows put in it. And at this point, to us, it was done. It was time for the maiden voyage. here's what that seat turned out to look like. And one day my father-in-law got caught out in a rainstorm, and that open air cleaner sucked in some water and didn't like it. So he decided he needed a hood. So we started on that and got that done. I'll just do a quick video of the whole thing, inside and out. We didn't get the bed floor finished yet.